Hello. Hopefully we're live here. I'm looking at my levels on this side. Feel free to let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay or not. In theory, I've got my audio set up so I can actually hear it today. I'm getting the thumbs up from the wife. Thank you, wife. Hi, happy Tuesday, everyone. All right, let's switch over to the live stream view here. So as you can see, we have sunrise in near Mono Lake, actually just outside of Yosemite. Let them get a second to get settled in. So here, let me flip over. I'll show you where we're taking off from today. So Yosemite is this big block over to the left here. We're going to be leaving from just off Mono Lake, which is just outside the park. Pretty lake to kind of start at. Okay, the wife's saying that I'm too quiet. Let me see. Thank you. I'll try and bump it up a little bit. It's quiet in my headphones too. I don't know why. All right, let me know about that one. How's that? Change too many things at once. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah, a little better. Okay. Thank you. Well, you have to let me know. I do have a video today, so if we need to turn it up first. Nice, fractals are neat. All right. Hello, everyone. So why don't we dive right in then? Today we're going to be exploring Yosemite National Park. We're taking off at sunrise. I tried to pick a good hour for us to go see the mountains. And I'll kind of change the time throughout the day. You can see some different views. A small administrative thing at the beginning. I started to post notifications on Twitter. So if you want heads up that the stream is happening, it's every Tuesday at 7. So you can add that to hold on, I'm going to take this off. Too much echo for me. New Twitter account. Thanks, Fractals. I'll lean on my wife to flag me down if you can't hear me. Take my headphones off. But yeah, so I'll start posting to a Twitter account as just kind of a heads up where we're going, some pictures of the park, that kind of thing. So feel free to check that out if that's an easier way to get an early heads up reminder on Tuesday. And then also Discord, of course, is a great place to see that. And those tweets now get posted to Discord. So had a lot of fun setting up a little bot to do that. All right, so that's the administrative piece. One quick thing before we dive in, you're going to see some incredible views of Yosemite Valley towards the end of this flight, or kind of middle end of this flight. I wanted to shout out to a flight sim community contributor, VFX Simmer, who created all of the incredible views you'll see of Yosemite Valley, things like El Capitan, Half Dome, Glacier Point, Bridal Falls. We'll talk about all these as we fly by them, but if you're as blown away as I was when we go and see them, it's his work. So thank you very much. I reached out to him and he said it was all right to use it in the stream. But if you're flying along at home, I highly recommend checking out his package. Speaking, hooray for automation, I know, right? One question for the chat, kind of as we're getting going. You know by now that we kind of do a series of a couple of topics that relate to the park, a little bit more of a deep dive into each one. Would you prefer to know what the topics are going to be from the start, or would you prefer to kind of see as we go and kind of have them unfold? The vibe and the kind of sentiment, sort of the energy of the stream is supposed to be chill and laid back. So surprises feels like not quite the right way to do it. But if we prefer that, I'm also happy to. Thank you, Fractals. So Fractals just posted up, see as we go. Okay, we got one vote for see as we go. Drop them in the chat if you have thoughts or opinions on that. Just not a real poll, but we'll just do kind of a rough feel on it. Yep, thanks Fractals for posting. So if you have Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can follow along. That flight plan is the one that you're seeing on the iPad here now. So this is the direction we'll be going. You can also pull it up in the cockpit if you have that set up. It'll load from there. The other one, if oh, thank you, Fractals. You are so ahead of me. Thank you. The other one is if you don't have the game, but you still want to follow along, if you like seeing kind of where are we relative to the map of the world, there's this flight tracker that should be working. If it ever drops out, let me know. In theory, my iPad will also fail if it fails, so I hopefully will know, but don't hesitate to post. All right, cool. So, shall we see if the poll actually works today? I know, right? Yeah. Thank you, Fractals. So, Yosemite. While people jump in on that poll, and while we start to take off here, what do you say? Self-situated, so I got my rudder pedals going. Oh, look at that. Okay. Oops. We'll see. Let me know if that engine noise ends up being too loud. So we'll stay inside the cockpit for the start here. But it's a little bit, there's such sweeping views that it's really hard to really see the park without going outside the plane. So this particular stream will do a little bit more mix of inside and outside the plane. So as you know, each week we'll pick a new national park to explore together, visit some of the key attractions. We'll talk a little about the park, some of the things that make it special or interesting. Let's see if we can get a takeoff here. Don't want to rotate too early. Settle back on the runway. All right, there we go. Okay, pulling up my landing gear for those of you who like this part of things. You got sunrise over Mono Lake. Pick a different park. We'll talk a little about the history, a little bit about the key things to know and to see there, and generally just explore the park together. Like I mentioned, if you have a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, feel free to join along. I'm in the USA West server. I'm gonna turn this thing around. So that's a good place to go if you want to see. And you'll notice that there's a lot of other people out flying in the Yosemite area. Some of them may be using the flight plan, some may just be flying around. It's a very popular place to go and explore. Small disclaimer, yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of the simulator, so please don't try any of these things in the real world. There's a couple more rules that you'd want to be careful to follow. What else? So I've researched the park. Poll's working. Go ahead and let Jules know the poll above. Okay, awesome. Sounds like straw poll's working. So I've researched the park in preparation for our flight today and added anything useful or new with sources back to the National Parks wiki page. I do this for two reasons. One is it's the best possible way to make sure that the facts are checked by others. And it's also a good way to give back to a living body of knowledge so that the research for this flight goes beyond just our hour here together. So to that end, if you notice anything incorrect or needs to be clarified, please go ahead and fix the wiki page. As the wiki community often says, be bold and make the updates. Also, before I forget, we will vote at the end for the next national park we want to explore together. So last week we decided on Yosemite as our next destination. Do a little mountain sunrise panorama here while I'm talking. So last week we picked Yosemite as our next destination. At the end, we'll vote then on which national park we want to go to together later, or the following week, next week. So without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. So sit back, relax, and let's explore Yosemite National Park. And the first thing I'm going to do here, actually, is turn onto my course. I was so distracted by the sunrise and the mountains going the wrong way. Okay, what's the poll result there, Fractals? This is a pretty popular park. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people have been there before. Apparently I can't get a round trip tied to Cali. Yeah. Yeah, you get that kind of double-edged sword of like, oh wow, what a great time to go and visit this place. And then yeah, it's probably not the right time, but we can go and explore it together virtually. At least that's a nice proxy. So we're coming up here in to Tioga Pass and Tioga Peak, which is off to the sort of straight ahead of us. This is a really common way to enter the park if you're driving. So you can see, we'll get a little bit lower in here. One of the pieces of survey feedback I get from time to time is to fly a little closer to the ground. So I'll see if I can do a bit of that today, especially as we fly through the Tuolumne Canyon Grand Canyon of the Tuolumne River just a little bit.
Sync rate.
So this is
Sync
the
rate.
Tioga Pass. This is a common entry point and a common way people used to cross the mountains back in the day,
500.
and I guess still do. So you can see the road kind of off to the right, but as you're driving around here, there's these incredible mountains that you ascend very quickly. All right, straw poll results. We got 2 votes for yes in the last 10 years. I'm also in that category. I have been to Yosemite recently, and I highly recommend. And then here, I'll flip out of here so you can see. Like I said, in the plane, it's just a little too, it just doesn't really capture the kind of shape of the mountains. You can see the glaciers, or like where they would have been, that U shape, shows up really nicely in the game. And we have 3 votes for not yet, and no one has been a long time ago. So either been recently or haven't been in a while. Okay, so yeah, so I fall in that more recent camp, and I'll bring in stuff that I remember from a recent trip. Let's get this plane flying. So we're flying up in mountain air and mountain turbulence, which is um, always fun in the real world as well as in the sim. So it's a little bumpy here. That's actually what it would be like if you were flying. This is why you don't fly this low in mountains. But let's see, is there snow year round in the mountaintops? There is on some mountaintops, yes, snow year round. There's also a couple of glaciers still in the park. A lot of them have since disappeared, but I don't have any simulated snow on here. This is just the snow they grab for the day, and this high up there is definitely snow that you'll see. Kind of pull around here, we can look. So like off in the distance, I believe is a big glacier over in that direction. There's also a lot of lakes and kind of glacial lakes that are carved out, and you'll see those around as we're flying too. Let me know if that engine's too loud while we're outside the plane, by the way. So this first place that we're coming up on, show you, actually I missed 2 of them. So this is yeah, okay. There's 2 little places that I'm going to show you. This is a very fast little plane. So this is that mono lake. That's where we just departed from, is what that looks like from the sky. The other one I'll pull up is that pass that we just flew through. That's what that looks like in the real world. A beautiful little pass. Okay. So now we're deviating a little bit. I'm kind of following the river and carving along the valleys a bit. So we're approximately following it. Like I mentioned, so this is a TBM 930, which is the type of plane that we're flying today. It's a very fast plane, so I'll attempt to slow it down and maybe pause a little bit if there's something that we should really spend a moment on. Let's pull back in here and you can see from the cockpit. Fractals, what do you think about posting? Oh, I'm sorry, you already posted it. What am I talking about? Yosemite National Park. So it's an American national park in western Sierra Nevada, Central California, bounded on the southwest and northwest by national forests. The park is managed by the National Park Service, and it covers an acreage of 750,000 acres. It's a pretty big park. I'm going to slow down just a little bit here, kind of tune this plane up a bit. There we go. And we're coming into what's called Tuolumne, another pronunciation. I didn't realize how much pronunciation practice I would be doing for this. It makes sense in retrospect, but apologies if I get any of these pronunciations wrong. So this little meadow that we're flying through here is called Tuolumne Meadows, and this river is Tuolumne River, so it kind of carves out this nice little meadow area. So let me pull this up, you can see what this looks like. So this is Tuolumne Meadows from the ground view. At this gorgeous sort of, I believe it's one of the highest elevation meadows in the High Sierras. So very cool place to go and check out. So Yosemite is internationally recognized for its granite cliffs, its waterfalls, clear streams, the giant sequoia groves, lakes, mountains, meadows, glaciers, a lot of stuff we'll talk about today. About 95% of the park is designated as wilderness. On average, 4 million people visit Yosemite each year, so it's a very popular park. They spend most of their time in the 7 square miles of Yosemite Valley. So just to put that in context, let me show you little planes
500.
bouncing all over. Here, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Pause this for just a moment. And I'll show you what this looks like on the iPad. So just to put the bigger picture. So here's California off on the west coast. If we zoom in here, Yosemite is that kind of central area there. And Yosemite Valley then is this small strip in the center. So that's where most people, when they go visit, that's where they'll spend the majority of their time. There's a lot more to the park, but that's definitely a highlight part of it. Flip back to live stream here. So it's one of the largest and least fragmented habitat blocks in the Sierra Nevada. It supports a diversity of plants and animals. The park has an elevation range from 2,000 to 13,000 feet. So you can see we're flying now at 9,000 feet. Now we're going to flip in, see if we can do a little canyon run through here. So this is the Grand Canyon of the Tuolumne River. It is where the largest glacier was in Yosemite back when it was filled. So you can kind of see that U shape that gets carved out by a glacier. We don't talk much about glaciers today, although this is a great park for that. There's Glacier National Park and a number of others that are really good for glacier stuff. So we can get just a little bit of a view of what that looks like. So lots of diverse animals. About 50% of the species, of the 7,000 plant species, 50% of them occur in the Sierra Nevada, so right down here. All right, for those of you who are asking for a canyon run in the survey feedback, we'll see how this one goes. I don't know if it's more fun like this or like the other one. It's probably easier to fly like this. All right, I'll flip out like that one. What else? The geology of Yosemite is characterized by granite rocks and remnants of many older rocks. This particular canyon actually is an interesting example of this. Let's see if I can do a canyon run while still trying to explain it. So imagine that some millions of years ago, the view is better outside. Okay, yeah. I'll flip to the outside. I agree. I think it's something about the combination of the plane and just the size of the walls that we're dealing with that just really doesn't capture it. You know what the other thing we can do, actually, because we are able to just change these things. Let's get ourselves a little bit more light, although the light doesn't come through super well. So, all right. So I'll probably stay outside the plane for most of the time. So what happened some millions of years ago is this volcanic rock kind of formed underneath the Earth, and then the western half got lifted, the whole thing got lifted up above the surface, and then the western half got tilted, or the eastern half, excuse me, got tilted up. And so what happened was you ended up with this kind of, imagine a giant slab of rock, and then the west side just gets tilted up higher. And so all of the rock through Yosemite is kind of tilted and running down to the west. So the east is higher to the west, which means that when you enter the park from the direction we came in, you cross these very steep high mountains right away. But if you enter from the other side, it's actually kind of a gradual, slow ascent in, which is also why you get these really picturesque views as you come in, because you have the lower mountains in the front from the western angle, and then the higher mountains in the back on the eastern side. So, agreed. Okay. Thanks, HW. So that's kind of how the park was formed. And this granite then got carved out by glaciers, and it also got carved out by rivers. So Tuolumne is one of the ones that we're flying over right now. And this is one of the bigger rivers that flows through the park. The other thing I'll mention about Tuolumne real quick, I got two photos I'll load up here. Oops. Do a little pause break while we fly around here. I planned a little shorter flight so I could pause in case, because mountain flying is a lot. So two ones to highlight here. One is this, well, I'll show you the Grand Canyon Tuolumne. So this is what we're flying down right now. It looks kind of like this in the real world. There's a number of waterfalls. The canyon run is very cool. Oh, good, I'm glad you like it. There's a number of waterfalls through the park. So this is Water Wheel Falls, which we actually just passed over a little bit ago. I can flip back and try and point out kind of where it is. This waterfall is really interesting because as the water flows down, it'll get caught in the air, and actually the air blows it back up to the top, and so it ends up kind of refilling itself up above and just being this sort of a water wheel. It literally refills itself as it's falling down the rock. Nice. Nice job, Fractals. Okay, so um, the one of the core topics then for today, and again, let me know in the survey at the end if you like knowing the talks before or after, is waterfalls. So all around Yosemite are these waterfalls because again, the earth just kind of tilted up, the water runs off. When you have those kinds of steep rocks with water running, then you get waterfalls. So one of them is this one. So back to the live stream. Um, yeah, so before we gotta take a stab at the poll above, yep, thank you. So what is frazzle ice is what Fractals just posted. So what is frazzle ice? You know, ice, but more frazzle. A collection of loose, randomly oriented ice crystals formed in super cool turbulent water, or Vanilla Ice's original stage name before writing Ice Ice Baby. So go ahead and drop in what you think it is in the survey down there. So we're flying through this Tuolumne Valley. The last piece of it that I'll mention is Yosemite was central to the development of the national park idea. So we'll talk about John Muir a little bit later on. But originally the land was signed by Abraham Lincoln based on a Yosemite grant. And then that was in about 1864. About 30 years later, John Muir came along and worked with Congress to establish a larger national park, and then eventually to get it managed by the National Park Service, so the federal government, to take over ownership of the land. It draws about 4 million visitors a year, like I mentioned, and it's constantly getting more and more visitors. All right, so we're going to take just a moment's pause here as we're flying at 180 knots. This is an interesting little segment of the park. So it's called the Hetch Hetchy Dam. And Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, excuse me, was a canyon. And originally it looked like this. This is an old photo of the canyon. It kind of reminds, when we get to the Yosemite Valley, hold this picture in your mind, it has that same sort of feel as the Yosemite Valley. And what happened was a number of conservationists, we'll talk about conservationists and preservationists in a minute, but a number of conservationists came along and said, you know what would be a really good use for this area is if we made it into a giant reservoir for the Bay Area, for San Francisco. And so they made a big movement to go and dam it. And so they dammed up the reservoir and filled it up. So you can see the old one is this sort of beautiful valley, and the new one's the reservoir that we see. And you can see it in the game still. It's this just big kind of old reservoir. Essentially what they were claiming is that it wasn't beautiful enough to warrant keeping it. So imagine you're John Muir, and this is what you remember from that valley. And his whole concern was, if you go and dam this up, it's gonna be gross. It's gonna look like it's gonna have a bathtub ring, for instance, because of the way that the lichens grow on the canyon walls. And so, sure enough, if you look at what the reservoir looks now, you can see off in the distance this bathtub ring all the way around it, which is, oops, really pretty unfortunate for what could have been such a beautiful valley. So, all right, Fractals, how are we doing on that poll? Keep flying around here. We got a little bit of a leg before we get over to from Hetch Hetchy to Yosemite Valley. Poll results. Let's see. Okay, we got 2 votes for ice, but more frazzling. Collection of loose, randomly oriented with 1 vote, and vanilla ice for 1 vote. It's a close race. So let's talk a little bit about waterfalls and firefalls. I promise we'll get to frazzle ice as well. So one thing I wanted to mention, there's a surprising number of terms associated with waterfalls. So don't worry too much about the specific words used. Frazzle ice is kind of a fun one for pulling out if you're at a party or something like that, but most of them aren't too important. That is amazing, yeah. HW, you did hear firefalls. So waterfalls and firefalls, and we have a couple of pretty cool ones at Yosemite. So you all probably know what a waterfall is. So water falls from a higher height to a lower height. There's a bunch of technical definitions of it, but basically what happens is, as the water's falling, it causes erosion typically underneath the waterfall, kind of behind it. I'll show you what it looks like. Um, and I'll pause the game real quick so we can. This is still Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, so like we've been flying through this for a little bit of time now. So you have your hard rock and the overhang. As the water falls, it kind of edges out the soft rock. That's why if you've seen a waterfall and you can kind of go in a little almost cave behind it, that's what that's about, is it kind of undercuts there. Eventually then, once it gets undercut so much, the hard rock falls from the top, and that forms the rocks that are at the bottom. And then the water will keep pulling backwards and it'll keep moving upstream. So, all right, so that's the basics of the waterfall. They can happen in a lot of different places for a lot of different reasons. We'll look at ones in Yosemite Valley, which are caused by glacial erosion. So if you have glaciers coming off the valleys, then you can get glaciers. So just as a side note on Hetch Hetchy, as much as I am biased towards keeping the land as it was, it is really pretty as a lake, you know, at least in the simulation. So quick sidebar on that. Okay, so that's the kind of waterfalls. I was going to do a little collage of types of waterfalls, and I was overwhelmed by the number of types there are. Essentially, it comes down to whether the water stays attached to the rock as it falls or if it goes back. It also has to do with if the water fans out as it hits the rock or if it kind of stays in a single line, like Horsetail Falls, we'll see in just a second. If it has multiple tiers, a bunch of other things, and that combination of things then defines the different types of waterfalls. All right, so we're coming up here on the end of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, and you can see the dam right at the end there. It doesn't render super well in the game, but we'll take a look at it anyway. That's amazing. Firefalls. Any similarities to Fraggle Rock? Fraggle Rock. Sup, Scott? I'm not familiar with it. No firefalls in Yosemite this year, not enough water. Thanks, Clutch. Oh, is that true, Fractals? No firefalls this year? I didn't even look at what they were doing. They put in some new rules about it, but it's sort of like tourism in the park is a whole different story this year. So, all right, there's your Hetch Hetchy Dam, at least as the game renders it. So you can see why they saw that location and said, "There's a good place for a dam." So, all right, let's start our climb out of here then. So we're actually going to go over and enter the park as a visitor would typically enter. So if you were going to go in and see Yosemite, this is maybe how you would come into it. Frazzle Ice. Okay, so what is Frazzle Ice? I was looking for videos of waterfalls or something that would be a little bit more, I'll say meaty, I guess. And what I ended up finding was this wonderful video about, yes, John, there's the cockpit. We can do a quick little sweep around it. So it's a very nice, sort of like leather seats. The seatbelts are undone. That's kind of fun. Good look around. So this is a very nice plane to be flying around. It's also one of the most popular in the simulation. So it's sort of one of the most popular parks and one of the most popular planes. But fractals, yeah, that's too bad. And not the original kind of firefall either, which we'll talk about both kinds of firefalls. So I'm looking for videos of waterfalls, something that shows a little bit more to it. And let me pull up this video real quick. I kept wanting to like cut it short or to jump around or something, and honestly the whole video is really cool for different reasons throughout it. So what I'm going to do is start this playing. Let me know if you can hear it okay. It's about 7.5 minutes, but it's good. It's really well done. They actually have this whole series that Yosemite put on that's all really good. Let this play for just a second here. Good to go? Okay, wife's giving me a thumbs up on volume.
We're on Yosemite Creek, below Lower Yosemite Falls. It's a cold, early April morning, and we're watching the Frazzle Ice formation. Frazzle Ice are these small crystals of frozen mist that forms in Upper Yosemite Falls and Lower Yosemite Falls. The particles of ice wash down the stream with the liquid water in a slurry, a slushy, slurpy, goopy mass that in many cases flows like lava.
So if you can imagine in your mind a giant Slurpee machine that is putting out millions of gallons of Slurpee into Yosemite Creek. It's amazing. It's not snow, it's not ice, it's something in the middle, and to watch it move underneath a Yosemite Creek bridge is pretty incredible.
This is one of the more unique phenomena that you'll see in Yosemite if you're lucky enough to be here in March and April, which is the prime season for this. But it's an amazing thing to watch something this dynamic in Yosemite Creek. You see something that the millions of visitors who come in the summertime never imagined something like this.
It behaves a little bit like cement in some ways, that it stops and it forms kind of a stationary piece, and then the flowing pieces go past that stationary piece.
The ice will surge into place, and with enough thickness, it stops, and the creek will flow a different direction. The water will drain out of where it's just deposited it, leaving this what looks like snow. But again, it's soft, it's unconsolidated. You would plunge right into that. Now we see this dynamic change as the frazzle ice has built up its own levee and caused the channel to clog up and is coming toward us. We're going to have to be ready to move here as the Yosemite Creek and all of its might is coming toward us. But you'll see this lava flow effect where the ice is going to accumulate and build up blockages that stop it from coming in a certain direction.
Like that he's just watching. He's markers, or you're super right. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. So there's some time lapses of these that I'll play for it. There's a couple of reasons I like this video. There's footage of the waterfalls that's really neat, as well as a couple of footages of the...
It's the full force of Yosemite Creek, which can be up to, say, 100 cubic feet per second. When that is moving along in a place where we don't expect it, where our engineering of building roads and trails and bridges hasn't anticipated the full flow of Yosemite Creek, has caused problems with damage to buildings on the side of the creek and our footbridges. At least one has been destroyed. One other was displaced by frazzle ice, picking it up off of its footings, and others have been inundated by the frazzle ice deposits at times.
So a lot of people that are in the park in March and April will be walking along the trail near Yosemite Creek and see piles of what appears to be snow.
If they took a little more time to observe, they would notice the snow is very selectively deposited only in the stream channels here. There's none up in the woods off to the side. It's the first thing people think of. Of course, it looks like snow, so what else could it be? And here's where frazzle ice becomes quite dangerous, because you can't tell how thick it is or how solid it is or how much water is underneath. If you were to walk out into this, you might make it a few steps and you might plunge through over your head into icy moving water underneath this frazzle ice deposit on top.
So it's Yosemite Falls.
Every winter at the base of Upper Yosemite Fall, a big conical mound of ice and snow develops. We call it the ice cone or the snow cone, and it can grow to be hundreds of feet tall.
The snow cone builds up from falling water that freezes while it's falling. It freezes in a couple of places. Some freezes at the bottom. Some of it freezes on the rock on either side of Upper Yosemite Falls. When the sun comes around during the late part of the morning, it starts to loosen that ice and it falls and builds up onto the snow cone too.
And you can hear them throughout the valley. It's pretty amazing how loud those ice sheets can be when they come crashing down.
There is a persistent myth that directly connects the snow cone's disappearance to the apparition of our frazzle ice deposits. There's not a direct connection. This is not the snow cone we see lying on the floor of Yosemite Valley washed out. The snow cone gradually melts away as temperature warms up. As temperature warms up, the volume in Yosemite Creek increases, but these sub-freezing nights will turn some portion of Yosemite Falls to ice that flows in the liquid water, and the frazzle ice, as we call it, is only indirectly connected to the snow cone.
I have heard people refer to frazzle ice as the snow cone breaking up, but if that were the case, then these other places where it exists in Yosemite Valley, that wouldn't be true. I've also observed it at Royal Arches Cascade, and I do know that it happens at Ribbon Creek, also over at Bridalveil Falls, and Sentinel Creek.
this is a marker for many of us in Yosemite Valley. When the Frazzle ice flows, it means that springtime is here, where the snow melt is increasing, but we still have the sub-freezing temperatures at night. So yeah, it is very much a marker of the season. You won't see this in June, you won't see this in October. You'll only see it in March and usually in April.
Well, Yosemite gets close to 4 million visitors a year. And the vast majority of those visitors come in June, July, and August. So they're here in the summer months. And I think that a lot of people are missing some of the magical events that happen in the wintertime. For example, Horsetail Falls. It looks like a glowing firefall in February. And
Okay, so one version of the firefall that occurs at Yosemite, this is actually named after an older tradition we'll talk about in a second, but Horsetail Falls, the firefall here.
And the snow cone at the base of Upper Yosemite Fall, you're just not going to see that in June, July, and August. And the fact that Frazzle ice is flowing a lot of times in the spring, it's pretty incredible. So I think that Yosemite in late winter and early spring holds a lot of very special and unique natural phenomenon that more people would probably come here in winter if they just knew that they could experience these things.
There you go, Frazzle ice. So this is one of those things I stumbled on when I was researching that really caught me off guard as just a cool phenomena of the park in general. So, all right, let me check up on the chat real quick. What's up, Scott? I didn't catch your joke. Really obscure joke. Okay, got it. Yeah, forbidden snow cone. And the firefall, every photo I found of it was incredible. Let me see if I can pull one more up real quick. Get another one somewhere in here. Yeah, here's a good one. So this is another view of it, because it'll happen later on as well too. There you go. And so it's just this ribbon. It's an ephemeral waterfall, so it only exists for a couple months of the year. And the sun catches it just right and just lights the whole thing up red and orange against kind of the night sky. First person to photograph this was Ansel Adams in 1940, or 1940s. The phenomena lasts about 10 minutes. So, the other firefall that you'll see, and let me continue flying here because we can attempt to do both of these at once. Now we're just kind of making our way over to the main, or one of the entries into the park. The other kind of firefall is, let's say this is the one that wasn't there this year. Okay, that Horsetail didn't happen this year, yeah. It changes year to year. It just depends on the conditions and how much snow there was and things like that, which is interesting because when Ansel Adams got that photo of it, like, because it doesn't happen all the time, it's not tourists come for it now because they know the seasons it's likely to occur, but previously it was just like occasionally you would notice that it looks like it's on fire. Let's say it's not like it happened again. Yeah, beautiful photo op. Beautiful photo op. And it really is. They have a whole plan for tourists who want to come and see it. So, should you find yourself in that group, you should check that out. Okay, so I mentioned there's a second type of firefall. The other kind of firefall was a tradition at 9 p.m. every night from 1872 to 1968. And it was the final act of a performance at Camp Curry, which is sort of like a summer camp kind of setup. Do a quick pan around. You can see, so this is the Sierra Nevadas, one view of them. And I will turn in here just a little bit, keep ourselves on course. You can see there's a lot of other people flying around the area. Okay, apologies for the kind of look around the camera. Okay, so what they did at the end of Camp Curry at 9 p.m. was they took burning hot embers and they pushed it over the edge of Glacier Point in Yosemite National Valley to the valley 3,000 feet below. This is what that looked like. So that's falling embers that were dropped off the edge. So history has it that David Curry, who founded the camp, would stand at the base of the fall and yell, "Let the fire fall," or something like that. That phrase is the phrase. Each night, which would signal then the pushing of the embers over. They stopped doing this in 1968 because the Park Service felt it was inconsistent with encouraging an appreciation. Oops, you probably hear that in the... Oh, that's the iPad. I don't know if that came through on the streamer, but that's the iPad if you did that in real life. Okay, let's get a recalibrate here. You could hear it? Okay, yeah, the wife's nodding at me. So that's, if you did what I just did in a real plane, the iPad app I'm using would yell at you like that, which is a good little safety feature. Anyway, so, but it was inconsistent with encouraging appreciation of the natural wonders. He considered it something like putting horns on a rabbit. It's just inappropriate. Apologies for that. I don't think I can real-time disable that warning. I don't know if I'd really want to, if I'm being honest. I'll just be attentive to the plain one. So the last piece that I'll mention on here, we have waterfalls, we have firefalls. There's also something that occurs called a moonbow. Beautiful photo op. Sync kids like the new plane. They do like the new plane, yeah. It's a fun plane. It's a fun plane. So a moonbow is just like a rainbow, except a moonbow occurs because of the light from the moon. And you'll often see it around waterfalls because you get consistent mist at the base of them. So this is a moonbow in lower Yosemite Fall. So when you go to Yosemite, you can go check out the waterfalls, and then you can try and look for the firefall at the evening, sunset, and then you can look for a moonbow if it's a clear night. All right, now we're just making our way over the kind of meadows across. This is all Yosemite. Actually, it's off to the left of us, but this whole area. Get a little bit more speed. All right, so in summary, waterfalls, it's water flowing from higher to lower land in a variety of different ways. If the water is super cold, it can form frazzle ice. Sometimes light brings new colors, like with firefall or moonbows. And who knows? Shouting, "Let the fire fall," may produce unexpected results. Oh, iPad. Okay. Well, anyway, it wasn't a very good joke anyway, so probably for the best. All right, Fractals, you want to take us into our next topic here? This is John Muir. Where's giggling at me? Anyway. Feels like there should be a quick way to turn that off, but that's all right. All right, so which person did Muir visit Yosemite with and convince of the need for national parks? We have lots of people, notably President Theodore Roosevelt. We have Snoop Dogg, and we have trick question. Muir was a fictional character. So go ahead and vote on that, and we'll look at the results in just a second. So John Muir is known as the father of the national parks, or John of the Mountains. He was an influential Scottish-American naturalist, author, environmental philosopher, botanist, zoologist, glaciologist, and an early advocate for the preservation of wilderness in America. He wrote a lot of letters, essays, and books describing his adventures in nature, especially around Yosemite Valley and the Sierra Nevadas. His activism helped preserve Yosemite Valley and Sequoia National Park. So I'm going to take a super quick pause here, and I will tell you why in a second. So each of these clouds is formed when air rises from the ground. It pulls up moisture with it. When the moisture reaches a certain height, then the cloud is formed. So when you're flying, you can use clouds as sort of a signposts for where wind is likely. So you notice that the plane got very jumpy as I was passing under the cloud. It's because there's rising air there, so it's causing a lot of turbulence. So I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here and use my science knowledge to make this flight a little bit calmer by just going clear skies. Now suddenly, and I'm also going to increase the pressure, which makes it easier to fly. So there's advantages of the simulation. So now suddenly I don't have those pockets of turbulence, and in theory, now you have mountains can cause turbulence too, but hopefully it'll be a little bit smoother for us as we come around Yosemite Valley. All right, so quick side break on that. So John Muir was instrumental to creating this. He co-founded the Sierra Club and was a prominent member, and he devoted most of his time to the preservation of western forests. You could say that he exemplified the archetype of our oneness with the earth. All right, what are the straw poll results here? President Theodore Roosevelt. Nice, so most people know. One of John Muir's big contributions in or one of the big moments was a weekend camping trip with Theodore Roosevelt. And so let me pull up a photo of that. And we only have about 15 minutes, so I'm gonna kind of breeze through. I'm still kind of figuring out exactly what amount of content equates to a good hour of time. A couple highlights from John Muir's childhood. So he moved from Scotland when he was about 11. He moved to Wisconsin. He then enrolled at 22 in the University of Wisconsin-Madison, paying his own way for several years. He explored around Canada for a little while, eventually getting a job at a wagon wheel factory. He had an accident there that caused him to go blind temporarily, and used that as kind of he took it as a sign from God that it was the time in his life to go and do what he really cared about, which was botany. And so he left the wagon wheel factory and went on to try and get involved in preservation of nature and botany in general. Eventually settled in San Francisco and then spent a ton of time in Yosemite as a shepherd and other jobs, climbing the mountains, things like that. He wrote a ton about the park, really drummed up a lot of support for conservation and preservation in general. But he was a very show don't tell sort of character. So though he wrote and labored over everything that he wrote, his actual preference was to take people and just show them the so I'm kind of diving into the valley here. Apologies for that sync rate. I took my headphones off, but I have to imagine it's annoying. So
500.
A good pilot uses checklists to remember things, so I will add a checklist item to the top of my notes to remember to turn that off for later. So thanks for your patience on that one. But he loved to take people into the mountains, and he thought that that was the best way to really understand why they're so important to preserve. In particular, he took Teddy Roosevelt out there, and there's a very famous photo. So here we're flying through this canyon that takes us towards the park. So it's a very famous photo of the two of them on the top of Glacier Point. You see the waterfall off in the background. And so that was the moment. That kind of trip was pivotal for both of the men. So John Muir grew a great appreciation for Roosevelt, but Roosevelt walked away and really bought into the idea that these are lands that the federal government needs to protect. It's not sufficient that we have the states do them or private enterprise. So there's probably two warnings that'll pop up. There's a sink rate warning and a 500 above ground level warning. Again, in a real plane, those are very helpful, but not for us here. So Roosevelt walks away, and then he works with Congress and others to get the land dedicated for federal preservation to go and take care of it at the federal level. And that then turns into the national park system. The adventure of them going out into the park is a really, really cute story where it's the presidential entourage is showing up in the park, and Muir had already sold Roosevelt that this is a good idea, and then finally they get to the park and Roosevelt tells his entourage, like, we're not doing Yosemite this way. John Muir, please show me the real Yosemite. And so they went off together and went camping under the stars and under the sequoias, I think for 2 nights or something like that. Or no, excuse me, just a single night. But they stayed up all night talking under the stars and looking at the sequoias. And I mean, talk about a cool experience. All right, so I'm going to try and pull up here a little bit, and we're going to jump through. So there's a little thing I can do in this game where I can actually move the plane around. So I'm going to actually do that real quick and position ourselves up for a very classic view of Yosemite. So this is the view from what's called Inspiration Point. So this is looking down the valley. This is kind of the main. Man, life was easier back then. Wagon wheel factory worker and shepherd conversions. I know, right? You say that, but also it was interesting to read John Muir because he had a lot of life choices that he ended up making, and one of them was he was actually getting promoted at the wagon wheel factory because he had this kind of hard to find ingenuity about process and machine and how all these things fit together, how to run an efficient factory.
500.
Skills that ended up making him a really good leader for this preservationist movement, but like he definitely had some choices that he ended up making. I know, right?
Sync rate.
So that's a little bit about John Muir. He still had a lasting impression on people and their relationship to nature, especially in the United States and in Scotland. Very influential writing. All right, so we're going to take a pause real quick here. Oops. let's see if we can get that right there is Bridevale Falls. So let me show you two things actually. So I'll show you the Yosemite Valley. That view that I mentioned is called Inspiration Point, or the tunnel view. So this is what that view looks like in real life. And like I mentioned, we have that that content from VFX Streamer that makes our view in the game look actually really pretty good. But this is that actual view. The other one I'll pull up, Bridevale Falls and Cathedral Peaks, is where we are right now. So there's one waterfall. This is the first one you see when you come into the park. And you can see there's the Cathedral Peaks that are these three right off to our right here. That U-shaped valley here, there used to be a glacier here, and then there used to be a glacier all throughout this valley. So what happened is, imagine, oops, got the sign from the wife about this, thank you. So this U-shaped valley that we have here, there used to be a glacier right in here, and then there used to be a glacier right in here. This, you can imagine it like two different streams as they are now, but they're streams of ice instead. So one big block of ice, I think it was 4,000 feet high at its highest, so really, really tall, was flowing through here, and then glacial ice was flowing off of here. The reason that you end up with these really steep waterfalls and overhangs is one glacier carves out the valley here, and then one glacier carves out a deeper valley on this side. By the time all the glaciers go away, then you're left with this kind of incredible drop-off where the waterfalls form. So that's Bridevale Falls there. Let's keep going here because we got the rest of Yosemite Valley to see. You can see El Capitan off to our right. And this is a very famous and important place for rock climbers, which we will talk about next.
Sync rate.
It's a little bit choppy. So the downside of the nice imagery package is it's very intensive on the computer run. So there's El Capitan as a famous one. Fractals are neat. Thank you very much. All right. So to summarize on Muir, he believed in this cleansing force of nature, and there's almost like a temple. So the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir he was very opposed to. He wasn't satisfied with just conserving, just making sure that the resources were available, but he really wanted to preserve it. For his efforts, he's known as the Father of National Parks. Also, hot off the presses, he is projected to be the #1 selling Halloween costume in 2021. So start growing your beards now. Let me show you what he looks like actually. Oh, you saw that picture with Roosevelt. So make sure you get your beard growing now because it's going to take a little while to get that level of beard going. And I'm also happy to announce that my wife and I are going to be getting on this this new Halloween costume craze. We will be doing a couple's costume for Halloween as John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt. Very excited for that. All right, rock climbing. Fractal's posted up a poll. The wife didn't know I was going to say that. We can decide who's who later, it's fine. Okay, so what does YDS stand for? Is it Yosemite Decimal System, You Don't Smell, or Yikes Difficult Standards? As in a reference to standardized testing. This isn't a very good poll. I tried. It actually stands for You Don't Say also, so you'll see it in there too. Anyone who knows more about rock climbing, feel free to jump in. I did take a rock climbing course in college, which was a lot of fun, and learned a bit there. But I know that I have a very basic knowledge of it. So one of the things I'll point out real quick on rock climbing on Yosemite. So this is El Capitan, and it's a sheer granite rock cliff that people really wanted to go and climb. In the 1950s, it was really big, and in particular, let me pull up this. So I want to show this video. I won't show the whole thing, and also we only have 5 minutes, so I'll be respectful of time. But let me. So just a quick shout out to the creator of this because I want to make sure that they're getting their recognition for their work. But I'm going to pull up a downloaded one so we don't have to use the internet for it. So this is the Yosemite Valley we're looking at now. You can kind of see these views. The thing that I wanted to point out here, though, is looking at a single rock climber in the rock face, then the zoom out to see what it would mean to be a rock climber here. So you can see off on the right, there's these kind of layers that you get, and that's a element of the granite. That's a way that they're formed. They have those kinds of layers. You see them in Half Dome too. Um, let's see if we can get a zoom out here. There we go. Okay, this is the one I was looking for. To get a sense of the scale of what we're looking at, but also then the scale of what it would mean as a rock climber if you imagine trying to do this, especially if no one's ever done it before, which is how it was in the 1950s. And Rosno, take it away. 5.10s all day. Okay, so there you go. I think that's probably the best view of it. You can see the Yosemite Valley too. So that piece is good for context of just like how big are we talking about here. I'll keep flying along and talk a little bit more about them. So what happened in kind of the mid 1900s is a bunch of rock climbers got together at what's called Camp 4. And those rock climbers wanted to gather here because it's a place that's often sunny. It's got really good different kinds of rocks. And rock climbing at the time was less standardized. They didn't have a way really of describing how difficult something was or communicating about it in more of a global sense. So the people who came to Yosemite started talking about ways to compare, you know, route X to route Y. And let me quick pause this real quick. Oops. See if we can get a view back of the valley. Okay, I'm gonna pause that while we about 3 minutes here. I want to make sure I show you a couple of cool things. So two that are really pretty nuts. So here's a view looking down El Capitan. And then the other thing that happened a lot at the park, there's boulders all over the place. And so these campers at Camp 4 these rock climbers at Camp 4 would come out and boulder on the rocks there. This one's a route called Midnight Lightning. It's got that kind of Midnight Lightning sign drawn on it. And rock climbing as a sport is this, it's not really, yeah, 5.10s. And Rosno knows the system. So look at the gym measures on hold, yeah. Yeah, and Rosno, great suggestions, Free Solo and the Don Wall. Excellent recommendations. So they got together, and rock climbing as a sport is sort of this balance of strength, endurance, agility, and balance, these really physical aspects, and then this mental side of things. And so you imagine that when you go to climb a boulder for the first time, what you need to do is look at it and figure out how you're going to position your hands and how you're going to hold your weight and where your feet are going to go such that you can actually climb it in any kind of meaningful way. And so when we talk about bouldering, it's called a boulder problem, because you're not just climbing at sheer strength, you're actually thinking through how you're going to climb it and going to solve that problem. So bouldering is one type of climbing. There's a bunch of other types of climbing I'd recommend checking out. We won't really get into it, but Free Solo, one that Rosno mentioned, is named after a style of climbing where you don't use any ropes at all. What else as we close up here? B.B. Bullock, Ansel Adams Wilderness must do. The rest of this flight plan actually flies past Thousand Island Lake, which we won't have time for today, but for anyone who goes and flies it, it's a nice little stop there. Okay, so all these rock climbers gather in Camp 4 at Yosemite Valley. They work on all these systems. Eventually, those ideas ricochet across the world and come together as this sort of grading system where you have a class 1 through class 5 of climbing. Class 1 being like you can walk it with low chance of injury, maybe you need hiking boots, but you can use your hands if you need to balance. Class 2 is more of a scramble. You probably need your hands, little potential of danger. 3 would then be you need handholds. You probably want rope if you're not very good, but you're probably okay without it. Class 4 would then be simple climbing, where you often want to use rope. And then 5 is technical climbing in general. So this is more like your classic sort of rope climbing. We're 8 o'clock. I want to make sure I finish on time here. So to quick summarize on rock climbing, you have your system then is class 1 through 5. And then under 5, they've subdivided it between 5.0 and 5.9. But as they got towards the end of the 19th century, rock climbers had gotten better. And so what was the hardest possible climb, a 5.9, they actually could do harder ones. So nowadays, the hardest climb is a 5.15D, which is what this looks like. kind of this rock face as we wind down. Follow on Jula and Jokam Jors. Yep, thank you very much, Fractals. So yeah, so okay, so we'll close out here. Fractals, do you want to post the poll for the next national park? And I'll kind of fly us away here as we close out here. So as some of you know, I like to do a cheesy sign off every time. So as we're passing the heart of Yosemite Valley, we have our Yosemite Falls off to the left. We have Half Dome off to the right, which is this one. Moon rising over there. And these are all Alaskan national parks, which has is tied, or depending on how you count, has slightly less national parks. It's the second most national parks of any state. So, all right, so we're coming up on half times here. So sign off. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining. I'll post a survey in the chat, or Fractals will in a second, if you don't mind. That links to survey, Discord, and Twitter, for those of you who like those different things. I do read the surveys. They are very helpful. It helps me choose what things to focus on and do more or less of. So thank you very much. And with that, thank you for being my co-pilot today. And until we meet again, keep on exploring. All right, Fractals, why don't we get those poll results out? We'll decide our next national park as we fly past Half Dome. Oh, we got a tie. All right, Fractals, you're the tiebreaker. Where are we going? Okay. Speaking of pronunciation, I need to look up how to pronounce that. Kenai Fords, something along those lines. Fords. So I will go and research that, and next week, same time, we can go explore that together. So, thank you all again very much for joining. It's always a pleasure.